Violence and explosiveness. That is what the Rushmen are after this year. I think there's a good chance that they might get it. These are snap judgments. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. I had to ask Larry Johnson because I don't remember everybody in his position group using the same word over and over and over and it being violent quite as often as they did on Wednesday after practice. And he did. He said he read a new book. He read Grit. He said it's a thing about toughness, but also that the defensive ends need to play more violently to get to the pass rush, the sack totals, tackles for loss, affecting the quarterback the way that they used to. And to a man, they all echoed that violent approach is what they want to use.
Yeah, it feels like we talk about this most off seasons or most preseasons going into the year. Like, how are you going to find more sack production? And like a couple of guys made a good point. Like, it's not always on us, right? Sometimes teams decide they don't want us to do that, so they'll run the ball or throw it quickly. Like, that is part of the equation. You know, sacks in college football are down, I think, kind of across the board. But I felt like there are things they can do to kind of get back to not even more sacks, just like being around the quarterback a little more, I think, than they have. And maybe with the exception of Tyleik Williams batting down like 45 passes a season, just being a little more disruptive kind of in that regard. So it seems like they're focused on that too, which is good. I wonder how it all might fit sort of within the totality of the scheme, because you don't want guys freelancing and getting out of rush lanes and leaving yourself susceptible. But I think Larry Johnson's probably been doing this long enough that he knows how to balance those two things. So if this line is focused on being more violent and being more disruptive, I'm certainly in favor of that.
But if there's a knock on the defensive line in the last couple of years, it's that they probably don't freelance enough. I mean, we talked about it a number of times last year that when JT Tuimoloau was allowed to break out the spin move, it was always effective because no one ever saw it. So I mean, I do think that's a piece of the puzzle. Football is unique because it allows you to be violent, and you're extremely large, strong, fast human beings who should be able to be violent if you want to. And I think at times, if you're so focused on the technique, if you're so focused on the rush lane or the passing, the pass rush that you're supposed to do, I think sometimes that gets in the way of just getting to the quarterback. So I think the value of having this veteran group, 4 guys who are returning starters, and you have Mitchell Melton, who's obviously in his 5th year. Like, you have guys that should know enough about the concept of the defense and about what they are supposed to do that it should allow them to be a little more free, and that should pay off. It
was sort of an odd juxtaposition there for JT Tuimoloau to be talking about that, because you don't, on the one hand, say at any point over the previous 3 years that JT Tuimoloau was not playing very hard or that he wasn't hurting some people with the hits that he was putting on. Certainly we've seen that from Jack Sawyer as well, that like he is playing with a high level of violence, but so they don't want to go up to that line and say, well, we weren't doing that before, but they are acknowledging, they can look at the results, whether that's sack totals, which is not the way that Ohio State purely measures the success of the defensive line, but win totals in the most important games specifically.
Being pushed around on the defensive line in the most important games.
It's something else that we've talked about with them being veteran, Berm, that you brought up. Like, they cannot deny what has happened over the previous 3 years. And they may have all had flashes of really high-level play. And JT had an all-time performance against Penn State, and Jack Sawyer was great against the Cotton Bowl, but it didn't add up to them accomplishing the things that they want. So I think maybe that message could take hold in a little bit different way for both mature guys and mature guys who have yet to do the things that they set out to do.
I wonder if there's like a version of paralysis by analysis, where like you're so focused on the exactness of your job on that particular play that you almost don't allow yourself the ability to kind of react to what's happening. Which like I thought it was interesting that one of the last things that Larry Johnson said, and I asked about Mitchell Melton, but I'm sure it applies to everybody, is they want to put some more of these guys in positions to, I think, feel freed up to kind of just let it rip and get after it and use their teammates to help cover up for that, whether that's a tackle or a linebacker or whatever. So I think that's good. I think if you can have guys, like kind of straddle both worlds, where like obviously playing sound is important. That's the most important thing, I think, of defensive line play. But you can probably get too caught up in it, I think. And I wonder if they feel like maybe they've done that a little or gone too far to that end and not kind of like allow themselves to just like play football the last couple of years.
And it would make the guys feel better. In as simple a word as possible. We've talked a lot about JT Tuimoloau last year and how like he's playing really well. The stats don't always equate, but like he's playing really, really well. And I think once you start to see those stats stack up, all of a sudden you feel more confident. You start to do more things, and
I feel like that happened for Jack at the end of last year.
For sure. Like you saw him take off once he started to click, and like, oh, I can actually make the play and not just come close. I mean, and JT, in listening to him tonight, the one thing he said is like he just wants to be more consistent, and I don't think that he's been inconsistent by any stretch, but there have been parts of games and stretches in games where he's kind of disappeared from an impact standpoint. And if you want to be a first-round pick and athletically he has all the tools to be that guy, then you think that that's something that has to change. So, I mean, all that comes into the same mindset, though. Like, that's a violent mindset. Like, I'm not out here to look pretty. I'm not out here to be finesse. Mm-hmm. Like, you're a 6'5", 275-pound defensive lineman at Ohio State. The goal is to hit people hard, not to look great.
It may seem odd to be starting snap judgments by looking at, Ohio State and their defensive line's mentality and the mantras and the slogans they're using, but that's what happens when, like, you have 4 returning starters up front and there's maybe not a ton of intrigue about what the personnel is going to look like.
There's not a ton. This is not a defensive line point, but we did talk about him yesterday. Leroy Roker lost his black stripe after practice. Just got that notification.
Called it.
Yeah, good call. What did you say?
That'll be, you can check back maybe for Bill Landis' thoughts on that on the Stock Watch. We're going to do that on the Thursday episode of the Podcast Daily. Not a lot of intrigue with the personnel. That's why we're talking about the mentality.
Intriguing, though. Larry Johnson said he does not consider Kaden Curry and and Kenyatta Jackson as second teamers. He said that he considered those guys ones. Will he play them as their ones? That's the intrigue, right?
Well, you can't play all 4 at the same. Well,
why not?
Yes, you can. Not every snap.
You can play 5 defensive linemen.
Why not 8?
And you could play 4 defensive ends and Tyleek out there.
What if you want 4 ends and then right behind them 4 tackles?
I think you could play
down
4 defensive ends and Tyleek Williams and have a pretty disruptive pass rushing situation.
I agree with that.
That wasn't what I was getting at.
Too late.
But it's a great idea. All ideas are good, right? Maybe
well,
no. Maybe
not.
No, not that one.
I had an idea to ask
JT
Tuimoloau about if football doesn't work out for him, if he's going to join the WWE. And if
part of the bloodline.
And he said he's never thought about it, but he likes the WWE, and he said he grew up loving it, and he does not have a name picked out for himself yet as part of the bloodline, whatever. So that's a slight diversion.
Roman will give him his name whenever he's ready.
That's right. Yeah,
okay, moving on. I thought you guys would appreciate that I asked him.
Thank you.
I do. Yeah. Thank you.
The original
I did it for you, not for them.
The original tribal chief is always looking for more talent in the family. Did you find something else out, Bill, about the pecking order there? Because we know who the first 4 are. And I think we have a pretty good idea. Once you throw, if Kaden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson are also considered starters and Mitchell Melton, like those 5 ends, Larry Johnson wants to play them all. And he said he's got 5, maybe 6 defensive tackles that are game ready as well.
Yeah, I think the tackle part, I guess, is a little unclear. Like, clearly it's Tyleek and Ty Hamilton. I would assume that Hero Kanu is one of those guys, too.
Caden McDonald,
Jason Moore, Tywone Malone, and I guess that's it, right?
Well, you got Will Smith Jr.
Will Smith, Eric Mensa. Like, I would imagine those guys are a little bit behind. So I think we know the players. I don't know that we know the order in which they might appear in a game. That to me is still a little uncertain.
Yeah, I think we have like an idea of what it's going to be. My perspective is that it's,
or if there even is an order,
it's that the TNT boys or whatever. And
That's the explosive part.
The TNT.
Ty,
is that what that's for?
Ty came over and Tyleek said, "Well, we are Ty and Ty, but we're going by TNT
because TNT is
and we have an explosive handshake as well, and we are explosive."
Okay.
That came from the players. Okay, that's fine.
That was not put out there. By someone trying to be clever. That was done by Tyleek and Ty.
I didn't know it was like related to the dynamicism or the explosive.
They would like to be known as TNT.
Okay, so you have those 2. I think Caden McDonald would be the next one in. I think then Hero Kanu and Jason Moore after that. That's how I see it.
You're not going to get any argument from me.
Yeah, that's probably how I would guess it too.
There's a lot of conversation going on about Caden McDonald, and it's not just from me for once. So the rest of the rushmen, the rest of the defensive line, Larry Johnson, they are really encouraged by what he's doing, and it doesn't surprise me at all.
No, it doesn't. I mean, you heard a little bit last year, but what I think is really good is that you're hearing that now. You heard a lot about Jason Moore in the spring. I don't think Jason Moore has done anything to like make people think less of him in camp. And some of the practices we watched, he looked pretty freaking good. So if like those 2 guys are making a move, then that to me kind of not solidifies, but makes me feel significantly better. I think about maybe the only question I had about this defense is are the young defensive tackles going to be ready in a way that allows Tyleek and Ty to not have to play every single meaningful snap of the season. So it seems like those guys are progressing that way. I think Larry's still pushing it. The number he threw out there quite a few times is like 25 snaps, 25 snaps, 25 snaps. Can those guys play 25? I'd imagine they could. Do they have to play 25 every week? Probably not, but you want to get them to that point so you can feel that they're reliable, and I think they're close.
That order I have in mind is because of what Jim Knoll said last week about Hero Kanu and like the inconsistency that he's had. Like he's flashes, but he's not been able to put it all together consistently. And to talk about Jason Moore and Caden McDonald has not really slowed down at all.
I thought it was interesting, Bill, you bring up those snap counts, and Larry Johnson seemed to be working from like he's speculating, projecting off of 60 snaps in a game, which means that Ohio State thinks their defense is going to be pretty good. But then he was talking about Kaden Curry needing 25 of those snaps and rotating. And it's like, okay, well, the math gets really interesting. Are you really going to be able to pull JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer out after 35? Against most opponents, you would think so. I think like where the intrigue has always been when we've had the conversation about rotation is in the biggest games and not marrying yourself to a set rotation on certain downs and ignoring situation and level of competition. So like I still don't even know if we're having the right conversation about it with Larry Johnson or if we should take that as this is absolutely what's going to happen, because I don't really expect that it will.
I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe 25 is a number you want to feel good about, like everyone being able to play, but perhaps it's a moving target in some of the more high leverage situations. I think it probably should be. I also wonder, I don't know if we've discussed this much, like Ryan Day and most head coaches leave that up to the position coach, but now if like Ryan Day's not worrying about what his opener is going to be on the next drive while the defense is on the field, I wonder if he might be like, hey, Jack and JT need to be out there right now.
And I also think,
or they've been out there too much. Let's get Mitchell.
But it also doesn't have to be just that. It doesn't have to be Jack and JT are out. Here go Kenyatta and Caden. Like you can have those guys out there mix and match, so you can get those 25 snaps. And Kaden Curry, again, I think this is like the fourth time we've talked to him in the last 2 years, and every single time the first question people ask him is essentially, "Why are you still here?" And like I don't understand. You know, it's a week before the season opener, and we're asking, do you feel like you're not getting enough? Like
it's August 21st. You want to transfer?
Like it's a weird thing, but he said whatever snaps they give him, he's going to play as hard as he can on those snaps, and
which he has proven to this
That's
point.
the attitude you want
with a high level of violence,
right? Yeah. So I think that this is probably the deepest Ohio State defensive line since 2017. I think that I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen someone like Tywan Malone step up. I'm a little surprised that we didn't hear Larry Johnson definitively state that Edric Houston is like in the rotation at defensive end because he's
Josh Mickens.
He mentioned Josh Mickens, which is a name I didn't think we would have heard.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could see that stretch from those 10 guys he's talking about to 12 or 13 pretty easy.
We'll see. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a lot of depth if you're going to play 16 games. But in the biggest ones, you're definitely not going to see 13. Like, sometimes.
What if you have them all out there at once?
Well, you can't do 13.
It's called 13 personnel.
Told you. Derek Dooley tried it. It didn't work. No. I can promise you that will not be effective. But I don't know what it'll look like, because as we've mentioned before, there seemed to be a pretty wild shift in approach from one year to the next, and probably something in the middle would be right where Ohio State needs to be. But does it matter in the first 3 games? No, it won't. That could be the opportunity to get to 13, and then maybe you see something from Josh Mickens, who Larry Johnson mentioned right away. He's like put on weight and he's more comfortable and he's flying around. Like maybe that changes the conversation. But
said Josh Mickens came out of nowhere.
Came out of nowhere was the word. So it'll be fascinating to watch all that play out, because that's a second half of Akron conversation, because we know that the top 4 are not going anywhere.
I also think it's a like back half of the year conversation too. If once you get past that Penn State game and like are ramping back up to the Michigan game, I think that's another opportunity to get some of these guys into depth some run. But I think you want to get them out there early to show you that they can do that, because you want to keep Jack and GT and Ty and Tyleek fresh for whatever the last game of the season is. I don't know the date exactly, but there's going to be opportunities for them to play. I think we will see. Probably, I don't know, maybe I'm being naive. I think we will see sort of like the appropriate amount of rotation if a couple of years ago it was like, this doesn't make any sense, and last year was like, why aren't you rotating? I think we'll land nicely. We'll land nicely in the middle this year.
We've Goldilocks it. Obviously, a lot of conversation about Mitchell Melton, like that. He was the first guy at the table sitting down. You could just tell like how happy he is to be in this opportunity and to be healthy and doing. Like the guys on this team, when you talk to them about Mitchell Melton, like their eyes light up, like, oh yeah, we got something there. Like it's weird because we haven't really seen it, but like everyone knows it.
Who have, yeah.
I didn't expect him to be compared to Allen Iverson tonight.
No, that was interesting. I talked to Mitchell on the side about some of his pass rushing thought process, which I thought was really fascinating. I kind of want to save it.
Yeah,
but
that's a tease.
Yeah. I mean, people said it in, like basketball on the football field is like how he described it, but how he's going about like developing that mindset, I think, is interesting.
We'll get into more of that later on. I think Bill's probably going to write about it, and then we may have some more to talk about with Mitchell Melton as the Stonk Watch returns for a little Thursday, wrapping up training camp as the Buckeyes are in that last week before they shift to game week mode. We will have one more set of interviews. That'll be Thursday night. So we'll also talk about that on the podcast daily tomorrow as we get set to talk to the offensive line, which is, it's like Christmas Eve right now for Bill Landis. But that's going to put an end to the Rushman conversation for now. Thanks for joining us for Snap Judgments. It's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham over here. I'm Austin Ward. Talk to you tomorrow.